your brilliant contribution. Yes, Honorable Buah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to add my voice to a well-deserved tribute to our illustrious son, Kofi Annan. Mr. Speaker, as has been variously noted, was appointed the United Nations Secretary General 1997 to 2006, and to basically know his achievement, Kofi Annan was a co-recipient with the United Nations of the Nobel Prize, Nobel Peace Prize in 2001. It speaks volumes of the work he did. Mr. Speaker, a lot has been said about his achievement. It is important to note that when Kofi Annan was appointed as the United Nations, the world body itself was in crisis. Member states were refusing to pay their dues, and they were citing bureaucracy and waste. Kofi Annan began and championed major reforms at the United Nations that brought the confidence of this world body back. That has been noted. And afterwards, you realize that the world body began to gain its credibility back, all because of Kofi Annan's leadership. Mr. Speaker, we talked today about the progress we've made about Millennium Development Goals, in Africa especially. This was championed by Kofi Annan. Before this Millennium Development Goals was set up as a template for world progress, every country was on its own trying to achieve healthcare, education, in different directions. This Millennium Development Goals basically gave us a guide. Not only a guide, but it helped the world to basically bring those countries that were, quite frankly, below. And has made a lot of progress in healthcare, especially because of this very committed Millennium Development Goal that was championed by Kofi Annan. And the world cannot forget that role he played. Mr. Speaker, we cannot also forget his steadfast commitment and his boldness. And if you want to know how strong Kofi Annan's leadership was, you have to look at the Iraq period. The whole world, the Great Britain and the United States had determined that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and they made a decision to go to war. There was pressure on him. The Speaker let it go on record that at one point his office was bugged by the CIA. And I remember, and I quote, I'm paraphrasing it, that when it was noted by UN security that Kofi Annan was basically being trailed left and right because of his position, his insistence that there was no need for war. He said they could tap him 24 hours because he was not afraid. And there was nothing he was hiding. He would speak the truth. And Kofi Annan, after the Iraq war, was vindicated. There was no weapons of mass destruction. Any leader at that period who have, quite frankly, been pressured by these powerful bodies to toe their line, but he did not. Mr. Speaker, we've talked a lot about his role in the world. But Kofi Annan's role, quite frankly, must be seen in the lens of the things he did for the African continent. A lot has been said about his role in different countries. We can remember the things he did to avert war in Kenya. Post-election violence almost killed so many people. And it promised to kill more. But for Kofi Annan's singular intervention in Kenya, where he was able to bring leaders on both sides to agree to a power-sharing government. And we cannot forget Kofi Annan's role in that period. His role in Liberia and Sierra Leone has also been noted. Mr. Speaker, another important role that we cannot forget, and the leadership that Kofi Annan provided for Africa especially, was the global, how he championed the global funds to fight AIDS, malaria, and TB. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine the cost of AIDS drug and how Africa could have funded it? This initiative has up to today subsidized very expensive AIDS drugs for AIDS patients across the continent and other places. It is the reason why people who are infected are living healthy lives on the continent today. Mr. Speaker, we cannot forget this very important role. We can also forget, as we pay tribute, we must remember that Kofi Annan never forgot. He was Ghanaian in everything he did. He had time after he had finished his work to come back home and serve as the Chancellor of the University of Ghana. And he played a very critical role at this premier university. We note the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Center and what it has done for West Africa and for Africa. There's so much that can be said about Kofi Annan's leadership, his humility, and his shining example that we must all emulate. I think on the day of his tribute, I think a question has been asked. We must strive to look at what Kofi Annan has done. And as Ghanaians come together to honor him and united voice, continue to lift the Ghanaian flag through humble leadership, through integrity in everything we do across the globe. Mr. Speaker, may God grant Kofi Annan heavenly peace and mercy for the good he did for the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.